Name 3 countries in Europe.
Spanish.
They've never seen a book in their lives before. They don't know how to flip pages. They're going, how do I use this like an iPad? What? I mean, it just boggles the mind.
I just wanted to talk about something that keeps cropping up lately. Gen Alpha and Gen Z and the whole issue with illiteracy, mathematical illiteracy, and overall the behaviour that people are complaining about. A lot of teachers are quitting the profession due to the behaviour of Gen Z and Gen Alpha students.
26% of kids were having frequent toilet mishaps, so they're not properly toilet trained. 28% cannot eat or drink independently by 5 or 6 years old. 25% do not have basic language skills, i.e. being able to say their own names, for goodness sake. 37% in total, they said, were not ready for schools. And more than a third of students, they say, are not ready for school by the age of 5 or 6. 28%, this is the most extraordinary one, don't know how to use a book properly. And the teachers are reporting that kids are picking up books, let's say this is a book, and they're going, like it's a device, like an iPad or a phone or something.
They're complaining that the kids can't read, which they can't do maths, they don't concentrate, their attention spans are very low. What do you think happens when people are raised on TikTok and on tablets and their parents never tell them no and they become entitled little monsters who will soon be released on society? I'm also Gen Z, but I'm a Gen Z elder. I'm on the older end of Gen Z. So I don't think anything that is happening is surprising at all. We also all lost 3 years of our lives during the pandemic because we were all locked inside our house forcefully. I went outside because the government is untrustworthy, and so anything they said was something to be suspicious about, in my opinion. But essentially, more and more of these videos are coming out, and you're seeing a lot of these street videos. I'm seeing a lot of these street videos where one is just a teacher and he's asking people on the street like, oh, how many continents are there, or what country are we in? Things that just should be known, like basic information that anyone should know.
Name 2 countries in Africa.
Honestly, just thought Africa was a country.
And why is that? Explain.
I don't know, I didn't think it was that big.
Okay, I'll give you a clue. Nigeria's in there.
Jamaica.
Name 3 continents.
I want to say London. Or is that just a place?
Why do you think London's a continent?
Because it's a natural place for where people go for a certain thing.
So is that why it's a continent?
Yeah.
What continent are we in?
UK. UK.
What country are we in?
England. UK.
So what continent are we in then?
London.
And it got me thinking about my dissertation that I wrote in 2021, which was about pedagogy, which is just a fancy word for education. I need more of that sunlight. It was about digital poverty, and it was about the effects of COVID on the future generations. Maybe I'll link it so people can have a read. But I was essentially looking at the history of education and how education hasn't changed in about 100 years, and that it needs to be updated, especially for catastrophic situations such as what we experienced between 2019 and 2023. And to me, what we're experiencing now, this influx of teachers quitting, teachers complaining, the bad behaviour in these generations, it highlights what was already happening before. Pedagogy was already out of date before the pandemic, but the pandemic absolutely blew it out of control. And essentially, what I had discovered in 2021, which is crazy, I basically predicted what's happening now. What I looked at was the history of education all the way from Aristotle all the way up until the pandemic, and I essentially predicted that this would happen. And this was because the studies I was reading, they were showing that kids were regressing, like they weren't potty trained anymore. A lot of kids were staying in nappies for much longer. Now look what's happening. Children are being put into school not toilet trained, and teachers are calling parents saying you can't bring your child here, and they don't know how to use the toilet. Because you're 5 by the time you go to school, really. I think maybe nursery you can be about 3, but that is crazy that you think it's a teacher's job to toilet train your child.
But how do we get to a point where a kid doesn't even know what a book is?
With many of these issues, I think parenting is the problem and parenting is the solution. And you mentioned the statistic, 25% of these kids starting school lacked basic language skills, including the ability to say their own name. How do you raise a child to age 4 or 5 who can't even say their own name? That's like an epic parenting failure.
It just shows the lack of responsibility on parents, and it also shows the lack of accountability that these school boards are taking, and they're blaming teachers when teachers can't do anything. School administrations are taking away powers from teachers to be able to reprimand children. You have to be able to tell a kid no, otherwise they'll become an entitled monster. And case in point, look where we are in 2025. So another thing that I found from some of the studies I was reading was that the masks, children learn how to speak through hearing the words we say, but also through seeing how the words come out of our mouth. The masks were causing issues in childhood development because the children could not see how the movements of the words were coming out of people's mouths. The study was showing that because of the mask, children's speech was delayed as well, and they were showing signs of autism, but this was environmentally induced autistic symptoms because they weren't able to mimic facial expressions, because you're covered from here. What you can see is their development of speech was also delayed because they weren't able to see the movement of the mouth. And I was like, this is crazy. Kids were regressing in speech, kids were regressing in things like using the toilet, and obviously since they were isolated, their interactions with other children were also limited. So at that time, I know it's a difficult time for everybody, but for parents, I'm sure spending time with their kids all day, every day, even though that's your kid, sorry, I'm sure that they were giving these kids iPads as well. And so this wasn't part of the study, but I've heard that shows like Cocomelon are really bad for kids because they are dopamine addictive TV shows. Like, they're too bright, they're too much. And so it's caused a generation of children to be addicted to dopamine, which is why their attention spans are so short, as well as TikTok being a short form content platform. That has also shortened the attention spans of kids, and I've seen a lot of teachers talking about how they have to incentivize every little thing, even things that should not be incentivized, like turning the page, like writing a 5-sentence paragraph, and they're complaining about it being 5 sentences, saying can it be 3 or 2?
As somebody that taught high school and basically educating our new young adults, every last one of us should be scared. These kids cannot read, they cannot write, there is no type of comprehension skills, no type of critical thinking, they cannot do anything on their own. They expect everything to be given to them. So in my class, we did this thing where I made them write once a week. They would have some type of assignment where they would have to write at least a paragraph, meaning 5 sentences. 5 sentences. The amount of assignments that I got in with 1 sentence, 2 sentences, the amount of complaints I got with the whole 5 sentences, that's too much. Can we do 3? Isn't 3 considered a paragraph? Oh, baby.
And it's like, oh my God, what the hell is going to happen? Because I'm in the same generation as some of these kids, which is nuts. I'm going to ask for a raise because they need to pay me more. But I think we're going to see some really devastating effects. They're already trying to replace competent people with AI. What's going to happen when people are literally illiterate and they have incredibly short attention spans, and like every part of human development has been delayed? I mean, if you think about it, anyone who was a teenager or a young adult or a kid, you had 3 years of your life taken away from you, so you're essentially 3 years behind in your development. I was like, how old was I in 2019? I was 20 in 2019. So my brain was still developing, meaning I'm probably 3 years behind what I should be mentally, which is probably why I'm so immature. But I think on one hand, we need to give these kids some grace because it's the world's fault and it's society's fault and it's their useless parents' fault. Sorry, you need to discipline your kids. The iPads need to end.
This is not an education system failure. This is a parenting failure. However, it turns into an education system failure because the stats also say that teachers are spending upwards of 1.5 hours per day changing kids' underwear because they've wet themselves, or helping kids do basic things like drink or eat, or understand simple skills that you would assume they would have had. So a parenting issue then affects the education system. And I think sometimes schools get more of a bad rap than they ought, because schools ultimately are a reflection of what's going on in the homes.
So we do need to give these kids some grace because they did lose 3 years of their life. They're 3 years mentally underdeveloped, including me in a weird way. At least I learned how to read. Oh yeah, and then the phonics thing. They took away phonics and they started teaching kids how to read by using visual cues instead of learning how to actually sound out the words. Let me grab literally anything here. Looking at the back of this package, There are words here that I've never seen before, but I'm still able to read them by sounding them out. But now we have kids who aren't even able to read basic words. And it's scary as hell. Because of this whole pushing kids through, we're essentially going to see a new class of people. We're going to see a class of people who can read and a class of people who can't read, which is something, I don't know if I really predicted that. I kind of did in the digital poverty part of my dissertation, where I talked about people who have access to technology during the pandemic. And they're going to have the advantages that people who don't have all this technology, they're probably going to end up being more successful. It's kind of the difference between back in the Middle Ages or whatever time period, people who had access to books and people who didn't. It's that same thing. And now with AI, like, AI is actually a detriment. I think it'll actually make people dumber due to brain atrophy, which is something that is still yet to be seen. But it's really, really scary. And it's weird that I kind of predicted this in 2021 when I did my dissertation. But yeah, when I was talking about being able to read things, here's a word: tocopherol acetate, ternifolia seed oil, ANNUUS, anus. Like, a lot of children won't be able to do that because they don't know how words fit together. They don't know that T and H make the. They don't know that A and U make ow. They don't know the way that these words go together. So it's going to be a really weird and interesting time. I think a lot more teachers are going to quit because the behaviour is horrendous. I think parents are to blame, but the government's also to blame. The government overreach is crazy. We're seeing the government feeding kids now, and I get that's a good thing on one level, but at the same time, it's a parent's job to do that. If the government's going to feed the kids now, apparently the government is putting out guidelines on what a child needs to know before going to school. Shouldn't a parent know that? Everybody who's having kids right now, you went to school during a normal time. You went to school and you were toilet trained. You went to school and you probably had a reasonable amount of manners. So why does the government need to put out are people that dumb these days? Like, it's really weird. So I don't know what's going to happen. I feel like more teachers are going to quit. Less people are going to want to be teachers. We're going to have a whole generation of people who are underskilled. I don't know what the hell's going to happen. It's very scary. We're going to have a generation of very entitled, sociopathic, narcissistic personality traits, not the narcissistic personality disorder, not the disorders per se, but like the traits of these disorders. I think they're going to be exaggerated, and we're gonna live in a very scary world. And I don't know how you reverse this, because when you look at studies, like they did studies on Romanian children in orphanages because they were very neglected. In Romania, they forced people to have loads of kids, and then people couldn't take care of these kids, so they had these Romanian orphanages where these kids were just treated like animals. They were isolated for hours of days. They were fed like animals. What they found from these studies is that kids who were neglected at a young age, I think it was something like 5, neglected all the way from like 5, they had a very difficult time integrating and being rehabilitated back into society. Whereas if you caught the child at, I think, 2, the child had a better chance of being able to be rehabilitated and reintegrated into society. So I don't know what the hell's going to happen if people have been letting their kids watch Cocomelon and iPad stuff since birth. They don't know how to read, they don't know how to write, they don't know how to do basic maths, and their attention span is completely shot. Obviously, you've got obesity, you've got Ozempic, you've got the food being full of ultra-processed things, the phthalates, just child abuse in general. So much misinformation, disinformation. People don't know what's real anymore thanks to AI. I'm very worried. I'm very, very worried for the direction that humanity is headed. My job is to analyse threats and make logical predictions to prevent these threats from happening in the future. So to me, considering that I predicted some of this stuff in 2021 and my job, there's a lot of alarm bells ringing in my head. So, I mean, I can't really do anything about it on an individual level, because I'm Gen Z. I can make sure that I'm eating as healthy as possible. I can make sure I'm limiting screen time for myself. If I have kids, I could do the same thing, but my hypothetical kids would still have to interact with these other kids, and I still have to interact with other people. Oh, I don't know. There's too many things, and like there are solutions, but we'd have to address the root cause. And I just feel like we live in a time where addressing the root cause of an issue is not how we tackle problems anymore. We just put a band-aid on it and we call it a day. But if you put a band-aid on a bullet wound, it becomes infected and it becomes septic, and then you die. So we can't keep putting a band-aid on these issues anymore. Like, this is a cavity in your tooth. You can't just fill a cavity without cleaning it. There's processes, and I don't really feel like we're ready to address these issues. We're all in this hideous experiment together, so let's see where 2026 takes us.
Well, you're loving this, innit?
Where's the Eiffel Tower located?
Paris.
What country is that in?
Italy.
Where's the Amazon rainforest located? What country?
Spain.
What do you call water in its solid form?
Well, water can't be solid though, can it? No, it can't be.
What language do they speak in China?
Chinese.
What language do they speak in Mexico?
Mexican.
What language do they speak in Egypt?
Egyptian.